Welcome to the channel, welcome to the channel, welcome to the channel, yeah.
Greetings and salutations. I am in the car loop. My name is Kamaria, if you didn't know. This is Black Sign Creates. We're going to talk about some books today. I am officially in a book hole. And simply because I read 2 books and they were just so good. When you read a book that's so good, and then you're like, what book could I read that would be any better than this? And you get stuck in that place and you have to process, what you just read, So, the 2 books I'm going to talk about, they're kind of oldies but goodies. First book written in 1993, second book 1998, and the longer y'all watch my bookish content, you will understand that I am a hoe for Octavia E. Butler. She is my favorite author of all time. Number 1, will always be, now, forever, till I die and beyond. Okay? And she was one of the first, if not the first, Black female science fiction author. She unfortunately died in 2006, so, we have a very, coveted, bibliography, a body of work that from her. And my ultimate favorite series is the Xenogenesis series. It's about aliens and humanity and things like that. Kindred is another one that is my favorite. I actually discovered Octavia E. Butler in college. I was taking a class about female writers, and we got assigned Kindred, and I still have my book from college with all my annotations, because I was an English literature major in college. So I annotated before annotating was cool. Everybody's like, I'm gonna annotate. It's like, well, if you have to write a 20-page research paper, you learn how to do that, So I actually wrote a paper about the, some of the themes in Kindred, and that book is near and dear to my heart because it brought me into Octavia Butler's world. So even though she is my favorite author, I still haven't read a few of her books, and 2 of those were Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, because I firmly believe that you can have a favorite author but also either not want to read a couple of their books or not like some of their books. And whenever I would read the synopsis for these books, I was I'm not in the headspace for this, So Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents are set in a dystopian world that the world has basically fallen into chaos because of climate change and a, demagogue president, and just kind of pushing forth ideologies against Black and brown people, against women. We need to make a Christian nation. And weirdly, it's set in 2024. So she wrote the book in 1993, and she was her whole idea for the book was, hey, I am noticing some things in our government and in this country. If they go unchecked, what would the world look like? So she wrote the book 30 years in the future from that time period. And the reason why I picked it up, if you know, okay? I feel like there are so many things in this book that have kind of a Nostradamus-like quality that she was literally telling the future and telling us what could happen based on, patterns that she saw in our, economy, in our country, and the government. And it's just interesting to see. Like, it's set in California. It follows a girl named Lauren, and she is 15, and she's growing up in kind of the beginning of the end. She lives in California, and it's on fire. She lives in this community with her family where they need to build a wall to protect themselves from looters. People can't find jobs. People, can't find water. A lot of people, schools are shutting down. All these things that are very kind of reminiscent, or even just kind of, oh crap, this is kind of what's starting to happen now. And as I was reading, I literally was just underlining and annotating. It's the first book that I've annotated since college. And I graduated college in 2010. So this book was the first book that I annotated, Parable of the Sower. And basically it's just kind of going through what this girl and this family is starting to go through. A lot of the adults are no, we'll get through this, we'll survive. That's kind of the motto of most minorities. Okay, we'll survive this, it's bad now, but there's no way it could happen. There's no way that the government would do that. There's no way, and she's just sitting here looking around nah, I gotta be ready. She has a go bag. She's got a backpack in her closet full of weapons and food, because she sees oh, it's gonna get a whole lot worse before it gets better. And there are so many things. The president in the book, his mantra is "Make America Great Again," and it's there were just so many parallels to what is happening now in our country that I thought were very powerful and very moving. And I feel like I wouldn't have appreciated this book and this duology essentially if I hadn't been in the mindset as I am now. And they basically, she ends up, and this isn't a spoiler, it's in the synopsis. So basically her family gets, taken out by, looters, and, because they had a community, they were starting to grow their own food, and, her whole family dies, and she basically has to go on the road as a 15-year-old girl and kind of figure out how to survive. And she is also kind of creating her own religion, because she sees kind of some of the kind of contradictions and, I guess, plot holes, about organized religion, how people will say they're doing stuff in the name of God, but they're really doing really horrible things, and they're using God to justify their kind of bad behavior, or doing really, really bad things to people. And she kind of is nah, I'm not gonna do that. I want to make my own religion. And she kind of starts being a prophet, essentially, and kind of spreading her thoughts and her new religion. And she makes a community, and it basically goes through a time in in this kind of dystopian America of what would happen if a lot of these things that people see that are wrong, and also what happens when you have a whole generation that's not educated, that doesn't learn how to read and write, and how that kind of plays a part in what the government can get away with. And this video is gonna get freaking flagged, but I will say there were so many parallels. There were so many things that you could say, oh, this doesn't feel like fiction. It didn't feel but the writing was immaculate. Octavia Butler just had all of her books always kind of explore what it's like to be human, the human condition and relationships and things like that, but also through a very like science fiction lens. It's very interesting how she can tackle all these hard topics and still be like, we go into space, you know, because it's very, both the books are very kind of slow burn, and it's very slow to get started, and it doesn't feel like science fiction in a obvious way. But if you read it knowing like it was written in the 90s, like, and I think some of the best science fiction or the best kind of horror are things that are possible. You know, because you read a lot of science fiction when there are aliens and monsters and, you know, all these things. And horror, it's monsters, it's magic, it's witchcraft. But I think some of the most powerful science fiction, fantasy, the most powerful horror are all things that are kind of rooted in reality. And these books were rooted in reality, and they're heavy, like trigger warnings all up and down the board. There's, you know, basically slavery, and lots of bad things happen to women, to brown people, and there are so many like layers to some of the problems that are happening in the books. Like I cried, especially in the second one, and it kind of ruined me for books right now, so I haven't read for a couple of days because I'm still like processing these books. But they're great, and I kind of kick myself in the butt for waiting so long to read them, but also at the same time acknowledging that like I read them at the right time, because all these things that happen in the book could happen in real life, and some of them are already happening now. And in her mind, in Octavia Butler's mind when she was writing, she was just like, what would the world look like if we let some of these systems go unchecked? If nobody kind of followed through with some of these issues, what would that future look like? And it's literally science fiction only in the realm of it was like dystopian. And the funny thing is dystopian fiction had like a place in like the 2010s. You know, you had all the young adult Maze Runner, Hunger Games, Divergent, all of these books. And a lot of those, in those books, people loved it. It's, you know, the people who are oppressed fight the government and they come out, you know, out on top. But a lot of those characters are white or white passing. You don't really get a lot of dystopian books that are from the perspective of people who have already been oppressed, because that ain't science fiction. It's like, or fantasy, it's real life. And I think sometimes it's really interesting to see how people respond to those kind of books, and they're outraged and they're, you know, but it's like, but our own government has done that to people, you know, any kind of marginalized group. And I think a lot of times, especially nowadays, people are so quick to forget the history because, oh, it could never happen to them. And they can see in a book with a kind of white or white passing character who's being oppressed. Oh yeah, that's wrong, and they're overthrowing the government. But if anybody else tries to do it, they're a threat or anything like that. So I think that this book, having brown characters and, you know, Hispanic characters and female characters, it definitely kind of puts like not a microscope, but it kind of calls into your mind what certain groups go through all the time since forever, you know, and that's the brilliance of Octavia Butler's work. But that's all I have for you today. Just a love letter to Octavia E. Butler. It probably won't be the last time. But I will say I will wholeheartedly recommend these books, but be ready for a gut punch. There's a lot of things that happen in the books that are horrific. Trigger warnings all up and down the thing. So not everybody is in the headspace for it, I'm sure, right now. But they are definitely worth a read. All of her books are worth a read because they're all great. Every single one. But I'll see you next time, book nerds. Bye.